White Groom tells Black Caterer to stay out of photos. The morning air shimmered with a kind of quiet excitement that only came on the day of a wedding, when the world seemed to lean in just a little closer, eager to witness the weaving of two lives into one. The Elmwood Country Estate, with its pale stone facade and sweeping green lawns, stood proudly under the early sunlight, its white columns casting delicate shadows over the wide front steps. Inside, the air was scented with roses and peonies, the soft strains of a string quartet floating from the reception hall as the last-minute arrangements unfolded like an intricate ballet. Marcus Dwyer had been here since dawn, meticulously overseeing the final touches for the catering. His company had been hired for some of the estate's most exclusive events, but this wedding was proving to be one of the most logistically demanding in recent memory. It wasn't the number of guests, a respectable 160, nor the complexity of the menu, which was elaborate but manageable. No, it was the unrelenting, almost military precision with which the groom, a man named Oliver Hensley, demanded every detail be executed. Oliver was tall, trim, and possessed of the sort of posture that suggested a lifetime of boarding schools and sailing regattas. He spoke softly, but his words carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Marcus," Oliver said now, striding across the ballroom floor as though it were a private study he owned, his white suit jacket already perfectly pressed despite the hour. "The champagne fountain is to be set near the west veranda, not by the bandstand. I told your assistant, but I want to make sure you understand. The sun will be setting in that direction, and I don't want glare in the photos." Marcus smiled politely, nodding. "Of course, we can have that moved within the hour. It's not a problem." Oliver gave a curt nod and turned to leave, but then hesitated, glancing back. "And one more thing about the photographs." Marcus paused, waiting for him to elaborate. "I've spoken to the photographer," Oliver said, his tone cool, almost rehearsed, "and I'd appreciate it if you and your staff stayed out of any shots of the ceremony and reception. I mean completely. No accidental appearances in the background, no candid moments in the corner. It's not the aesthetic we're going for." Marcus felt his chest tighten slightly, though his face betrayed nothing. "Understood," he replied evenly, though there was a faint echo of something unspoken in his tone. He had worked enough high-end weddings to know that sometimes clients wanted the illusion that the food, the music, and the entire atmosphere had simply materialized without human effort. It was an old story, but still, there was a sting to hearing it spelled out so bluntly. Oliver gave a satisfied nod and walked away, his white shoes making almost no sound against the polished floor. A voice came from behind Marcus. "Don't take it personally. He's wound so tight I'm amazed he can still blink." It was Sophie, one of Marcus's senior servers, balancing a tray of champagne flutes in one hand and smoothing her apron with the other. She had worked with him for years and could read his moods with unsettling precision. "I'm fine," Marcus said, though his eyes followed Oliver's retreating figure. "Just a little direct, that's all." Sophie smirked. Direct is one word for it. Hours later, as the guests began to arrive, Marcus found himself gliding from the kitchen to the reception hall, orchestrating the seamless delivery of hors d'oeuvres, ensuring the wine flowed at just the right pace, and keeping one ear tuned to the low murmur of conversations. From the corner of his eye, he noticed the bride for the first time. Amelia Street. James, soon to be Mrs. Hensley, was luminous in a flowing gown of cream and lace, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. She laughed easily with her bridesmaids, her joy seeming unforced, and Marcus thought she had the kind of warmth that could make a stranger feel like an old friend in minutes. As she made her way past the hors d'oeuvres table, their eyes met briefly. She gave him a smile, a real smile, not the polite kind one reserves for vendors, and said, "Everything looks beautiful. Thank you." Marcus inclined his head. Congratulations, Amelia. You look, well, perfect. She laughed softly. That's very kind of you. I'm glad you're here today. It was an odd thing to say, Marcus thought, given that he was here in a professional capacity. Still, there was a sincerity in her voice that lodged in his mind, even as she drifted away into a crowd of relatives. The ceremony was held outside under a sprawling oak tree, its branches strung with fairy lights and glass orbs that caught the fading afternoon sun. Marcus and his team moved discreetly along the perimeter, as instructed, ensuring not a single server appeared in any frame of the photographer's lens. It was during the group portraits, however, that Marcus noticed a shift in the bride's demeanor. Amelia's smile, so bright and effortless earlier, seemed to falter ever so slightly as she posed with Oliver's family, then with friends, and then again with her own. He saw Oliver lean toward the photographer, gesturing subtly toward Marcus's team as they passed in the distance, his lips forming words Marcus didn't need to hear to understand. And then, something unexpected happened. Amelia's gaze followed Oliver's, and her brow knit in confusion. She glanced toward Marcus, just for a second, before turning back to the photographer. Whatever was exchanged between them was too quiet for Marcus to catch, but he saw the way Amelia's shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes flickered downward. By the time the last of the daylight had melted into twilight and the first dance was about to begin, the bride's smile was back in place. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that a fault line had appeared, faint but unmistakable, in the perfect facade of the evening. He didn't know yet that before the night was over, that fault line would split wide open. The first dance began with a hush falling over the reception hall, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Soft golden light spilled from the chandeliers above, catching in the crystal glasses and the sequins of gowns, casting a dreamlike glow on everything it touched. Amelia and Oliver moved across the polished wooden floor to the gentle swell of strings, their steps measured and precise, as if they had practiced 100 times. Guests watched with affectionate smiles, the rhythmic swish of Amelia's gown punctuating each turn. Marcus stood at the far side of the room, near the catering station tucked behind a partition of potted palms, where his staff worked quietly to ready the next wave of courses. He kept his eyes on the dance floor, not because he had any reason to be invested in the couple's performance, but because there was something about Amelia's expression that kept pulling his attention. The smile was there again, practiced, elegant, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a tightness to her jaw that made him wonder if the weight of the day was already pressing too heavily. When the song ended and polite applause swelled through the hall, Oliver dipped Amelia with theatrical precision, then brought her upright for a kiss that was short, controlled, and strangely devoid of the kind of tenderness Marcus had seen in countless other wedding kisses. Amelia clung to his arm a moment longer than necessary, her gaze drifting toward the edge of the crowd, and then, briefly, toward Marcus. Sophie appeared at Marcus's side, murmuring in a voice pitched low so only he could hear. You notice it too, huh? Marcus glanced at her. Notice what? That she's already looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. It's subtle, but, Sophie shrugged, arranging the fresh tray of canapes with deliberate care. You work enough of these events, you start spotting the ones that aren't going to make it past the second anniversary. Marcus frowned, though he didn't respond. The comment sat uneasily with him, not because he thought Sophie was wrong, but because the observation felt too soon, too sharp. As the evening unfolded, the hall was awash with conversation and laughter, the clink of silverware and the rustle of silk. Marcus moved like a conductor in an orchestra, signaling servers, adjusting timing, exchanging discreet nods with the kitchen staff. The duck confit arrived on schedule, the seasonal salad followed without a hitch, and every champagne glass remained obediently full. It was just as Marcus was checking on the dessert station that he felt a presence beside him. Turning, he found Amelia herself standing there, still in her gown, her veil now pinned back behind her head. Her perfume, a faint, floral blend, drifted toward him, carried on the gentle currents of the room. "I know you're busy," she began, her voice low, "but I wanted to say thank you again. Everything tonight has been—" She hesitated, as though searching for the right word, then settled on, "flawless. Truly flawless." Marcus inclined his head, unsure whether to mention Oliver's earlier instruction about the photos. "I'm glad to hear that, Amelia. My team's been working hard to make sure the evening feels seamless for you." Her lips pressed together in something like a smile, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of something heavier, frustration, perhaps, or exhaustion. "Seamless," she repeated softly. "Yes, that's exactly what Oliver wants." There was a pause, long enough for Marcus to sense that she was weighing whether to say more. Her gaze shifted toward the dance floor, where Oliver stood laughing with a group of his friends, a glass of champagne in hand. "He's particular about how things should look," she went on finally. "Not just tonight. Always." Marcus didn't comment. There were certain boundaries you didn't cross as a vendor, and wading into the murky waters of a client's relationship was one of them. Still, the weight in her tone made him wish there was something appropriate he could say. Before he could respond, a man in a gray suit approached them, speaking Amelia's name with a cheerful urgency. She turned to him, and in an instant her smile was bright again, her hand resting lightly on the man's arm as they walked away toward another cluster of guests. Later, during the bouquet toss, the photographer worked the crowd like a seasoned hunter, crouching low, angling for the perfect shot. Marcus's staff remained invisible, as ordered, moving only when the camera was pointed elsewhere. But just as Amelia turned to throw the bouquet, Marcus happened to glance toward the veranda and saw Oliver, standing slightly apart, speaking to the photographer in a tone that looked sharp even from a distance. The photographer's eyes flicked briefly toward Marcus, then back to Oliver. There was an awkward exchange, a short shake of the head, a gesture toward the catering team, and then Oliver's jaw tightened, his hand slicing the air as if cutting off the conversation. Something inside Marcus shifted then, a faint ripple of unease. It wasn't that he'd never been told to keep his staff out of sight. He had, many times. But the level of insistence, the almost obsessive policing of even the most casual background presence, felt different here. It felt personal. The night pressed on, the music swelling, the laughter growing looser as the open bar did its work. Marcus found himself near the veranda doors again when Amelia stepped outside alone, her hands gripping the railing, her eyes fixed on the darkened lawns. For a moment, she simply stood there, shoulders rising and falling in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as if trying to steady herself. And then, to Marcus's surprise, she turned, caught sight of him, and beckoned him closer. "I need to ask you something," she said quietly, once he was near enough that the noise of the party was muted. "Did Oliver say anything to you about the photographs tonight?" Marcus hesitated. "He mentioned wanting the staff to stay out of them. That's not uncommon." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "He said the same to the photographer. Several times. And he made it sound like—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I just don't understand why he's so—" The sound of the veranda doors opening interrupted her. Oliver stepped out, his expression unreadable. His eyes flicked from Amelia to Marcus, lingering just a fraction too long before settling on his bride. "There you are," he said, his tone light, though the edge beneath it was impossible to miss. "Everyone's looking for you. Come back inside." Amelia's posture stiffened. She glanced at Marcus briefly, something unspoken passing between them, before she followed Oliver back in. Marcus remained on the veranda, the cool night air brushing against his face, and for the first time that evening, he felt certain that whatever undercurrent had been running beneath the surface all night was about to rise, swift and unstoppable, into full view. The murmurs of the reception faded behind Marcus as he watched Amelia disappear back into the ballroom, her silhouette framed by the doorway's warm light. Oliver's eyes lingered on Marcus a moment longer, and in that brief glance there was a tension so palpable it nearly stopped the rhythm of the evening around them. Marcus's instincts told him this was no ordinary disagreement about photography. It was something deeper, something rooted in control, in expectations that stretched far beyond the surface of a single event. Inside, the atmosphere hummed with a mixture of celebration and subtle unease. Amelia's smiles remained, but there was a shadow that hovered just behind them, something Marcus had never seen in a bride before. The joy was carefully curated, a fragile veneer masking a disquiet that seemed to grow heavier with every passing moment. Marcus returned to his station, but his mind was not on the trays he carried or the glasses he refilled. It was on Amelia, her eyes, the way she had searched his for understanding, and on Oliver, whose cold command over every detail was more than just a fastidiousness for perfection. It was a need for control that seemed to squeeze the life from everything and everyone around him. As the night deepened, Marcus observed the interactions unfolding around the room with a new clarity. Guests laughed, but some exchanged knowing glances. The photographer, a woman named Elise, moved cautiously, her camera poised but her smile tight. From time to time, Marcus caught her whispering with Oliver, their conversations brief but marked by sharp nods and impatient gestures. Later, during the dinner toast, Amelia rose to speak. The hall quieted as she stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she grasped the microphone. For a moment, she seemed to gather strength from the expectant silence. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her voice steady despite the quiver beneath it. "This day has been everything I dreamed it would be, and more." There was polite applause, but Marcus noticed the brief flicker in Oliver's eyes. Not pride, but something more guarded, like a soldier watching for signs of weakness. Amelia continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, finally resting on Oliver. "Oliver, thank you for choosing me, for standing beside me as we begin this journey." Her words were heartfelt, but the tension in her posture didn't escape Marcus. He sensed a silent battle being waged behind that smile, a struggle to reconcile her own desires with the expectations Oliver imposed. After the speech, the photographer approached Marcus quietly. "He's really strict about the images, isn't he?" Elise murmured, nodding toward Oliver, who was now deep in conversation near the bar. Marcus nodded. "More than I've ever seen. It's like he wants to erase us, everyone who's not part of his perfect picture." Elise frowned. "I've had clients ask for minimal staff presence before, but this feels different. It's almost like a fear of exposure." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion at the far end of the hall drew his attention. A young bridesmaid had stumbled, nearly dropping her bouquet, and Amelia was there in an instant, steadying her with gentle hands and a reassuring smile. For a brief moment, the tension seemed to dissolve, replaced by genuine warmth and grace. But as Amelia straightened, she caught sight of Oliver watching from across the room. His jaw clenched visibly, and he turned away, leaving her standing alone among the guests. Marcus's heart ached at the sight. Later, as the evening wore on, Marcus found himself back on the veranda, needing air and space from the growing heaviness inside. The estate was quiet here, save for the distant hum of music and the soft chatter of guests. To his surprise, Amelia stepped out again, this time without hesitation. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and she leaned against the railing as if it were a lifeline. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," she confessed softly, her voice trembling. "I thought today would be different, that it would be the start of something beautiful." Marcus approached cautiously, not wanting to overstep, but feeling compelled to offer some kind of comfort. "Sometimes the beginning is harder than we expect," he said gently. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. She looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment the weight of the evening seemed to lift. Thank you, she whispered. You don't even know how much that means. As the night deepened and the last guests began to trickle away, Marcus watched Oliver approach Amelia once more, his expression unreadable. He placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking low enough that Marcus could not hear the words. But Amelia's face crumpled, the tears she had fought so hard to hide finally breaking free. In that moment, Marcus realized the truth beneath the polished surface. This was not a celebration of love, but a battleground where control and vulnerability clashed, where appearances mattered more than happiness, and where the bride's tears were a silent scream for freedom. The music faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the soft hum of conversations tapering off as the reception neared its close. The once bright chandeliers now seemed to cast longer shadows, their light a little dimmer, mirroring the quiet heaviness settling over the evening like a thick, unwelcome fog. Marcus, standing near the service area, could feel the shift. The air was charged with things left unsaid, with emotions tightening beneath the polished surface of smiles and small talk. Amelia had slipped away again, this time without a word, leaving behind a trail of whispered concerns among the bridesmaids who noticed her sudden absence. Marcus spotted her quietly making her way toward the garden, a narrow path winding through hedges trimmed perfectly, their sharp edges symbolic of the night's growing tension. He followed, knowing that whatever was happening now was something private, but the worry in his chest overrode his usual respect for boundaries. Outside, under the sky darkened by thick clouds, Amelia stood alone, her breath visible in the crisp night air. The soft rustling of leaves was the only sound as she looked up, searching the stars, as if pleading for some kind of answer. When she saw Marcus approaching, her posture stiffened, a flash of vulnerability replaced by guarded composure. "Marcus," she greeted quietly, "I'm sorry if I'm bothering you." "Not at all," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I just thought you might want some company." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you. It's been a difficult day." Her voice broke slightly, and Marcus waited patiently, knowing sometimes silence invites words to surface. "I never imagined it would feel like this," she continued after a pause. "Oliver, he has his vision, and I tried to fit into it, to be the perfect bride, the perfect wife he expects. But it feels like I'm losing myself." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding more in those few words than any conversation could fully explain. It's hard when someone else's idea of perfection becomes a cage. She looked at him, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Exactly. And tonight, when he told your team to stay out of the photos, it wasn't just about pictures. It was about control, about erasing anyone who might remind him, or anyone else, that this isn't the flawless story he wants the world to see." There was a long silence between them, filled only by the distant laughter of guests still lingering inside, oblivious to the fragile struggle unfolding in the shadows. "Do you think he sees what he's doing to you?" Marcus asked softly. Amelia shook her head. "No. Or maybe he does and doesn't care. Maybe control is the only way he knows to feel safe." Her honesty cut through the night air, raw and unfiltered. Marcus wanted to say something reassuring, but he knew no words could untangle the complexities of a relationship built on such fragile foundations in a single moment. Suddenly, footsteps approached, deliberate and measured. Oliver emerged from the house, his expression dark beneath the flickering porch light. His eyes locked on Amelia with a coldness that sent a shiver through the space between them. "There you are," he said sharply. "We've been looking everywhere. The guests are expecting the final toast." Amelia turned to face him, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. "I'm not ready." Oliver's gaze hardened. "You will be. It's what's expected." Marcus took a subtle step back, sensing the tension snap like a wire under strain. This was not a conversation to be interrupted, yet it felt like a precipice. One wrong move, and everything might fall apart. Amelia's eyes glistened with tears as she met Oliver's cold stare. I didn't marry you to live under your rules. Oliver's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, Marcus's voice cut through the charged silence. Sometimes the most important moments aren't the ones we plan, but the ones we face honestly. Both turned to him, surprise flickering across their faces. Marcus met Oliver's gaze steadily. You want this wedding to look perfect. But real life, real love, is never perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes painful. Oliver's shoulders tensed, but Amelia's expression softened just a fraction. The hard edges of the evening began to blur, and for the first time, Marcus saw a crack in the groom's armor. The distant chime of the clock inside reminded them that time was passing. Amelia wiped her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to speak to everyone, to say what I really feel. Oliver's lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing, only nodded stiffly. Together, they walked back inside, Marcus trailing behind just enough to respect their privacy, but close enough to witness the unfolding of a truth that had long been buried beneath expectations and silence. As Amelia took the microphone once more, her voice rang out, not rehearsed or polished, but honest and raw. Tonight isn't just about a wedding, she began, eyes scanning the crowd. It's about the courage to be seen, really seen, even when it's uncomfortable. About standing in your truth, even when it's hard. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling deep into the hearts of those listening. Oliver's gaze softened, and Amelia's tears were no longer a secret but a testament to strength. Marcus felt a profound shift, knowing that while the night had tested them all, it was also the moment when something real began. The air in the reception hall felt charged, every flicker of candlelight and glint from crystal glasses carrying the weight of unspoken truths. Amelia stood at the center of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she held the microphone, the silence around her thick enough to hear the distant tapping of a clock. This was no longer a celebration masked in perfection. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered honesty that could change everything. I've spent today trying to be the bride Oliver wants me to be, she began, her voice steady but vulnerable, the perfect picture in a flawless story. But tonight, I realized that story isn't mine. Her eyes scanned the faces gathered, friends, family, even the staff who had worked tirelessly to make the evening possible. A collective breath seemed to draw in, the crowd hanging on her every word. Oliver told the catering team to stay out of the photos, as if our memories, the real, messy parts, don't belong in the story he's selling. But what he doesn't see is that every one of those people, every laugh, every tear, every imperfect moment, they're what make a marriage real. She paused, swallowing hard, then looked directly at Oliver. I didn't marry you to live in fear of being invisible or to feel erased. I married you to share a life where we both can be ourselves, flaws and all. Oliver's face was a mixture of shock, confusion, and something deeper, perhaps shame. The room was silent except for Amelia's quiet breaths, the vulnerability of her confession hanging in the air like fragile glass. Then, from the back of the room, Marcus stepped forward. Amelia is right. I've seen the way control can try to hide what's real, but in doing so, it steals joy and connection. His gaze was calm, compassionate, and unwavering as he addressed the crowd. Love isn't about perfection. It's about acceptance, understanding, and respect. Tonight, Amelia showed us that courage. A murmur of agreement rippled through the guests, and Oliver looked at Amelia again, his expression softening in a way that suggested a dawning awareness. For the first time all evening, Amelia smiled without reservation, tears still shining, but now born of relief and hope rather than pain. The crowd rose in applause, not just for the bride, but for the truth she had dared to speak. As the music swelled once more, this time a softer, more genuine melody, Amelia and Oliver shared a tentative dance, not the practiced perfection of earlier, but a real connection unfolding in the space between them. Outside, Marcus watched with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that though the night had been fraught with struggle, it had also become a beginning, a chance for healing, honesty, and a love that could finally breathe free.